Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a podcast about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney. If you're listening to this, you might not be comfortable calling yourself an author. Even I'm not there yet, but I am Author Adjacent. As we begin, I want to mention that while I'm not a professional author, I am a writer that's on that journey. I started this podcast so that I could share what I have learned so far and what my experience has been with the knowledge I've obtained, in the hopes that it will help you in your own journey. With that out of the way, let's get into it. In today's episode of Author Adjacent, I'm going to do something a little different. In my usual routine, I select a subject and condense my insights into a concise and easily accessible format, ready for your perusal. Beginning today and on every first Friday of the month, I'll discuss the books I read the previous month, providing reviews and sharing lessons I've learned as a writer from each one. Why? Because writers are also readers. As aspiring authors, it's crucial to immerse ourselves in stories and hone our ability to analyze them. This is one of the most effective methods for understanding how to construct their narratives and determining what techniques we might want to incorporate into our own writing. If you read a story and didn't enjoy it, take a moment to reflect on why. Was it a matter of personal preference? Did the genre, theme, or familiar elements fail to resonate with you? Or was there a specific aspect of the storytelling that didn't work for you? Analyzing the reasons behind your reactions to stories can improve your writing skills by helping you understand how to approach various elements in your own work. So today, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and review the 4 books I read in April of 2024. Wait, that's not right. Hi, folks. This is Michael 1 month after I posted this episode and realized that throughout the entire thing, I am saying April 2024, when in fact, I'm actually talking about the books that I read in March of 2024. How did I realize this? Well, I went to make the episode for April, and then noticed that the title for this one was a little off. I went back and I fixed the title and the description, but I'm also throwing in this little message to let you know that these are the books that I read in March of 2024. The analysis and the things I learned from these books is still useful, so enjoy the lesson. Anyways, go back to a younger, more naive me who didn't know what month it was. These will be spoiler-free reviews, as I encourage you to check out any of these books that strike your fancy. Without further ado, here we go! The first book I finished in April was Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. For those of you who have not heard, let me catch you up by channeling my inner book introducer and diving into the blurb with all the dramatic flair that I can muster. Samurai, Shinigami, vengeful spirits, and an impossible quest. The Emperor of 10 Kings has plunged Hosa into war, and the gods are angry. When the god of death gives Ian a mission to kill the immortal emperor, he knows he can't do it alone. He needs allies, heroes who will fight for him. How else can an 8-year-old boy hope to do the impossible? Whispering Blade, Iron Gut Chen, the Sentry Blade, and Flaming Fist. These are all names of legend, and the god of death has given Ian a way to bind them to his cause. There's only one catch. In order to serve him, they must first die. Never Die is part of Rob J. Hayes' Mortal Technique series, which is a collection of standalone novels that all take place in the same world. Despite what the blurb may suggest, this novel is primarily about the Whispering Blade, while other POVs are occasionally thrown in to add more context or flavor to the narrative. First, I'll start with the good. Never Die by Rob J. Hayes offers an enthralling journey filled with secrets and surprises. The great mystery of the tale centers around Ian, the boy who combined legendary heroes to his cause. Much about the young boy is hidden from the reader and the other characters, leaving us to puzzle out what his abilities are, how they work, and what are his motivations. This became the primary drive for me to continue flipping through the pages of this book, which I did eagerly. Hayes does a great job of hooking the reader early and moving the story along at a pace that keeps them from asking too many questions. Because we are too busy being enthralled by the gripping action scenes that are vividly depicted with cinematic flair. When the action dies down, I was left in the amusing company of a great cast of characters, each crafted with unique personalities and connected by dynamic and varied relationships. My personal favorite was Iron Gut Chen, as he had a propensity to shout his name in greatness to any who would listen. But they're all fantastic. All of this made for a very entertaining read that carried me all the way through the action-packed climax. But after I finished the book, I sat with my thoughts for a few days and couldn't help but feel the sting of plot errors bubble up through all my fun. Which brings me to the bad. Once everything is revealed and the dust settles, I found that I didn't understand certain characters' motivations. Specifically, their actions and their stated goals didn't seem to match for me. I'm sorry to be vague, but this is a spoiler-free review. Despite this narrative setback, I'd still consider Never Die by Rob J. Hayes a must-read for fans of thrilling wushu adventures or just fans of fun action in general. The lesson we can learn from this read/review is that though our story should be solid in all areas, readers can and will forgive weaknesses in some if your story is strong in others. Like most things in writing, it's about balancing. My second book for April was Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Oh no, I feel a dramatic blurb announcer coming on again. Prepare yourself. Charlie Reed looks like a regular high school kid, great at baseball and football, a decent student, but he carries a heavy load. His mom was killed in a hit-and-run accident when he was 10, and grief drove his dad to drink. Charlie learned how to take care of himself and his dad. Then, when Charlie is 17, he meets Howard Bowditch, a recluse with a big dog and a big house on top of a big hill. In the backyard is a locked shed from which a strange sounds emerge, as if some creature is trying to escape. When Mr. Bowditch dies, he leaves Charlie the house, a massive amount of gold, a cassette tape telling a story that is impossible to believe, and a responsibility far too massive for a boy to shoulder. Because within the shed is a portal to another world, one whose denizens are in peril and whose monstrous leaders may destroy their world and ours. In this parallel universe where two moons race across the sky and the grand towers of a sprawling palace pierce the clouds, there are exiled princesses and princes who suffer horrific punishments. There are dungeons. There are games in which men and women must fight each other to the death for the amusement of the fair one. And there is a magic sundial that can turn back time. A story as old as myth, as startling and iconic as the rest of King's work, Fairy Tale is about an ordinary guy forced into the hero's role by circumstance, and is both spectacular, suspenseful, and satisfying. Wow, I'm actually surprised how much Stephen King gives away in the story introduction. I went into this novel blind, having not known any of that, and I feel like he just spoiled 50% of the plot and its major turning points there. The lesson we can learn from this is often people will read a story not because we want to know how it ends. We all know how most stories end. They all end mostly the same. But we read them to see what emotional roller coaster we are taking to get there. But on to the spoiler-free review. As before, I'll start with the good. Fairy Tale by Stephen King provides a captivating twist on the classic visit to the land of fairy trope. Recall from previous episodes that a trope is a repeated pattern in storytelling that can be used to convey a complex idea quickly because we have all seen it before. Like the wise old man trope. But back to the review. The novel's first half is an engaging read with a gripping mystery and suspense that I would have 100% spoiled myself if I had read the blurb first. King does a great job with skillful characterizations and vivid descriptions that breathe life into the story setting. Each character I came across felt real. Their problems were real, and how they dealt with those problems was intrinsically human. Because of these qualities, I cared deeply for the characters and their plights. When Mr. Bowditch dies, something I don't mind saying to you now that the blurb said it first, I cared. I worried what would happen to the old man's dogs, and how would Charlie deal with his grief. I needed to know what happened to these people. Unfortunately, the book kind of fell apart for me after that. The quality of the writing and the skill of the words were still great throughout the whole novel, but the immersion of a chosen one trope that felt sudden and unearned soured much of the remaining story for me. The second half of the plot relies heavily on classic fairy tale logic, explaining that things are the way they are simply because the author says so. And I know that makes sense given what the story is about, and hell, even the title is trying to tell me something along those lines would occur. But I'm a reader that likes to know why things happen. And in this case, I'm not even given a chance to try to figure it out. This is not a mistake on the behalf of Stephen King. He knows what he is doing and has skillfully written a great fairy tale. I enjoyed the read, but it also taught me that I should stay clear of novels that proclaim heavy classic fairy tale influences. This is what I meant earlier when I mentioned that not every story is for every reader. That is this story's lesson. It's best to know what you want to write and do your best to make the greatest version of that thing you can. But let's move on to the third read of April, which was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. All right, folks, at this point, I think you understand what is about to happen. Here comes the blurb. Seconds before the Earth is demolished to make way for a galactic freeway, Arthur Dent is plucked off the planet by his friend Ford Prefect, a researcher for the revised edition of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who for the last 15 years has been posing as an out-of-work actor. Together, this dynamic pair begin a journey through space, aided by the quotes from The Hitchhiker's Guide and a galaxy full of fellow travelers. Zaprox, the two-headed, three-armed, ex-hippie and total out-for-lunch president of the galaxy, Trillian, Zaphoid's girlfriend, formerly Trisha McMillan, whom Arthur tried to pick up at a cocktail party once upon a time zone. Marvin, a paranoid, brilliant, and chronically depressed robot. Veet Bujagig, a former graduate student who is obsessed with the disappearance of all the ballpoint pens he brought over the years. Where are these pens? Why are we born? Why do we die? Why do we spend so much time between wearing digital watches? For all the answers, stick your thumb out to the stars. Don't forget to bring a towel. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is a pioneer of zany, dry. Adams blends a dry wit with absurdity, creating the quintessential experience for fans of the genre. Like many modern nerds, I knew most of the story going in thanks to the 2005 film of the same name. And just like every time I see a movie adaptation before I read the book, I was pleasantly surprised by the differences in the two mediums. See, that's the secret. Watch the movie first and you can't be disappointed by how bad the movie is compared to the book. Free wisdom right there. For the most part, the book just had a few more side tangents and a few less adventures. But in either case, I was highly entertained by the thinly veiled whimsy of it all, like the wrapping paper over a ball of existential dread. But I must admit the constant eccentricity can become tiresome as the story progresses. What started out as enjoyable and fun humor started to experience diminishing returns. There is only so many times I can hear a meaningless side story that affects or explains nothing of consequence. Despite these drawbacks, the novel offers a thoroughly entertaining journey, showcasing boundless imagination with peculiar characters in bizarre situations. Overall, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy delivers fun and whimsical escapades into science fiction and comedy that I unfortunately do not plan to revisit. Oh, what's that? You want to know what the lesson is for this read/review? Well, I guess I would say that sometimes you have to read the classics, or what is sensationally popular, to understand why it is so, even if it's not your thing. It's like homework. You have to do it to learn the lessons. For The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I think it's a classic because beneath its comedic surface, this story offers insightful commentary on various aspects of society, including bureaucracy, technology, and the human condition. Its satirical take on these issues makes them approachable and gives people a sense of control over something that is ultimately too massive for most of us to affect in any meaningful way. Damn. Things got heavy there for a moment. Well, instead of dealing with those complex emotions, let's move on to the last book. The final book that I finished in April was The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. And as with all the rest, let's start with the blurb. A boy has lived his whole life trapped within a vast library, older than empires and larger than cities. A girl has spent hers in a tiny settlement out in the dust, where nightmares stalk and no one goes. The world has never even noticed them. That's about to change. Their stories spiral around each other across worlds and time. This is a tale of truth and lies and hearts, and the blurring of one into another. A journey on which knowledge erodes certainty, and on which, though the pen may be mightier than the sword, blood will be spilled and cities will burn. The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence is a difficult book to describe without revealing many of its key features, but I will try my best. It's like trying to tell someone this book is great if you like enemies to lovers tropes, which, as the name implies, is when two people who are antagonistic towards one another end up becoming lovers, and I do love that trope. By revealing the trope exists in the book, though, you spoil the natural development of the relationship. It's similar with this book. If I tell you what tropes are in the book, you would be looking for them as you read through the pages. And I want you to experience the same joy, the same surprise that I did. What I will say is that this book covers a wide breadth of themes, including humanity's propensity for self-destruction and the power or responsibility of knowledge. These heavy subjects are balanced by a humor that had me barking out laughter multiple times, sometimes to the surprise of my wife and dogs. But what takes this book from good to great is how Lawrence skillfully manages the reader's understanding of the story. I won't give anything away in this spoiler-free review, but I will say that there are multiple times that I immediately wanted to start the book over after a huge reveal changed my understanding of the entire story up to that point. As mentioned before, The Book That Wouldn't Burn is a complex tale, but Mark Lawrence did a fantastic job only focusing on what was important. It's a lean machine of a story while still being nuanced and entertaining with well-rounded and realistic characters. The two main characters are interesting, not just because of their situation, and they are surrounded by a supporting cast of characters that adds so much flavor to the story. I know I'm heaping a lot of praise on this book, but it really did impress me. The only bad I would throw at this novel's feet was the sudden appearance of a backstory character. I think Lawrence set it up well, but I'm still confused about what happened to them for much of the story. I suspect it's something we learn in the next book of the series, but I'm not sure. While that may sound like I'm contradicting myself, I will point you back to the lesson we learned from the review of Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. A reader can forgive even blatant errors if the rest of the story carries more than its weight. Overall, The Book That Wouldn't Burn is a compelling read that leaves a lasting impression on its audience. The lesson I learned from reading and reviewing this book was to not be afraid to leave the mold of your genre. Mark Lawrence writes fantasy, sometimes the darker side of fantasy. And while he plays with the tropes that we all know and love, his worlds and stories still feel unique due to how against the norm his fantasy settings are. You won't find your typical medieval Europe-based realms in his books. As author-adjacent writers, it's important for us to read often and read analytically, to really pay attention to what is going on both in the story itself and beyond the curtain that the author is hiding behind. By studying each other's work, we can improve our writing skills, expand our vocabulary, or simply become inspired to generate a new idea. As author-adjacent writers, we need to be continuous learners. So let's learn from those who have made it to where we want to go, and from each other. All right, folks, that is going to wrap up this episode of Author Adjacent. Thank you for hanging out with me today as I reviewed my 2024 April reads and shared what I learned from them. Now, get out there and think about why you like and don't like the books you are reading. Once again, I'm Michael Vadney. If any of this was helpful or even just gave you a good chuckle, consider supporting the show by leaving a review on your podcast platform of choice, or telling a friend about the show. For more Author Adjacent, you can follow me on X at Author Adjacent, or shoot me an email at authoradjacent@gmail with your burning questions, comments, or topic ideas. New episodes drop every other week, so stay tuned. Now remember, the journey from writer to author might be long, but until then, let's be author adjacent together.